Again.
What the?
You see that? The minute I pointed this at
Yep.
the trap.
It began again, quietly, without warning. The strange pull was back, the subtle shift in the air, that thick, heavy silence that doesn't feel like stillness, but surveillance. It dragged the team toward the same place they had once nearly uncovered everything, the lake. A year ago, they had stood at its edge, chasing the impossible, and they had almost caught it. Until nature intervened, wildfire swallowed the forest, cutting the investigation short. The moment slipped away, but now the trail had led them back. Not a new site, not a nearby ridge, the exact location. It was the same trail, same trees, and same unnatural hush that blanketed the world like a warning. Mireya followed the path first. She was the one who said it aloud. The lake was the same. Her voice cracked through the radio like a chill up the spine. It wasn't random. The odds were too perfect. Something was to be found, or wanted them to find nothing. But this time, they came prepared.
It's crazy. Sure it wasn't just a beaver. No, that was... Just think about the sounds we've been hearing. It's like one slap at a time, right?
Technology meets mystery. The equipment came first, unassuming black cases, each one packed with military-grade tech that radiated quiet authority. The drone team had returned, but this time they weren't just retracing old steps. They had come back with something new. 6 tethered drones formed the backbone of the operation. Each one is engineered to stay in the air indefinitely, powered by a continuous feed from the ground. There would be no ticking clock, no countdown to battery failure, just a constant hovering eye, watching from above at a height of 300 feet. These machines weren't designed to explore, they were built to patrol, to guard, to hunt. But they weren't alone. Spread across the forest floor were seismic sensors, each one buried discreetly beneath leaves and soil, forming an invisible perimeter of intelligence. They didn't react to every twig or rustling raccoon. These sensors were tuned to detect something far more deliberate. Anything weighing more than 300 pounds, anything capable of making the Earth respond. If something stepped too close, the system would know, and in turn, the drones would be alerted and released to investigate. The system was simple, but brutal in its efficiency. From above, the drones scanned every inch of the forest in thermal for heat.
Scans revealed several possible clusters of nests. We decided it would be best if we divide and conquer. So Bryce and I are going to go and investigate the cluster that was found near the old nesting site.
Below, the sensors listened for pressure, movement, and the subtle tremble of weight against soil. Together, they created a net, and anything caught in it would not walk away unseen. The moment a sensor tripped, the tether holding the nearest drone could be released, allowing it to dive directly to the source. It wouldn't be guesswork. It wouldn't be delayed. It would be precise. And if something wanted to hide, it would have to beat both gravity and heat. Mireya took her position in the field, moving through the trees with a handheld thermal device in one hand and instinct in the other. Russell mirrored her path from a separate zone, sweeping through blind spots and narrow trails. Ronny stayed back, eyes fixed on the live feeds from the drones, watching every flicker of motion across each corner of the operation. Whatever was in those woods, if it moved, if it breathed, if it slipped up even once, it would be seen. And this time, it wouldn't get away. The drone base stood perched on a logging road just above the lake, an unassuming stretch of dirt that turned out to be the perfect vantage point. Elevated enough to steer clear the treetops, close enough to respond quickly if anything stirred below. It was a quiet setup, but every bolt and screen carried the weight of precision. Once calibration was complete, the drones began to rise one by one, like mechanical sentries lifting into position. Their motors whispered against the night air as they climbed toward a designated altitude of 300 feet. The moment they reached their mark, they locked in and held their ground. Kite mode, the team called it, a name that sounded playful until you saw it in action. Their thermal cameras scanned in wide, sweeping arcs. A squirrel or a raccoon would show up as a faint pulse. A deer? Brighter, more defined. But anything large, anything human or beyond, would blaze. From the operations base, Ronny monitored every feed. Dozens of split-screen views played out before him like a living chessboard. Each thermal image another square waiting to be triggered. Every pixel mattered. Maria moved through one section of the forest. Russell covered another flank, weaving between the undergrowth, eyes scanning, body alert. Neither spoke much. There was no need. Every footstep had the potential to mean something. And then, nothing. The forest held its breath. The screens flickered with static and heat, but no movement. No pings from the sensors. No flickers across the thermal lenses. It was as if the entire area had gone still, not in peace, but in anticipation.
I've got it in my sights. Look, look, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's moving, it's moving. The tree is not gonna move like that.
The stillness. Forests aren't meant to be silent. They hum with life always, but not that night. That night, it held its breath. Ronny scanned his thermal screen, the soft glow of equipment casting sharp shadows around him, but the feed revealed nothing. Just cold terrain and darker voids between the trees. No heat signatures, no movement. Russell reported that his zone was calm, too calm. Maria's area was the same. No visuals, no audio. Just a strange, pressing quiet that felt less like nature and more like intention. For Ronny, it was all too familiar. The terrain, the setup, the silence. He had been here before. Almost in this exact position, a year earlier, when something enormous had shifted in the shadows nearby. That moment had haunted him since. He never saw what it was, but he had felt it. The weight of it, the intelligence, the knowing stare that seemed to pierce through the trees and find him.
Maria and I decided to set up a trail cam directly in front of this fish trap. What was that?
And now, standing here again, surrounded by sensors and screens, it felt like that presence had returned, not moving, just waiting. And then, just as the silence began to feel unbearable, something changed. It had started. The silence cracked. It broke like splintered wood snapping beneath weight it couldn't carry. In an instant, something cut through the air, swift, forceful, and unseen. There was no wind to explain it, no animal darting off, no flutter of wings or crackle of branches. The woods remained still, yet something had moved within them, violently and with intent. Maria froze where she stood, her body going still before her mind could even form a thought. Russell spun toward the sound, instinct drawing his eyes into the dark. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Ronny leaned in over the screens at the ops base, fingers jumping from control to control, switching feeds, running every available angle in a rapid succession. The drones were positioned, scanning from above with sweeping precision, eyes locked on the canopy and the ground beneath. But the cameras showed nothing. Just cold trees, empty brush, black silhouettes framed in quiet. The seismic sensors didn't blink. No heavy steps registered, nothing to chase. No heat signatures flaring red against the blue forest backdrop. No clues, no movement. Yet the team could feel it, beneath their skin, between the beats of their breath. Something was there. Whatever it was, it didn't want to hide. It wanted to be felt, not seen. And it had just made its presence known. The first heat. It didn't come with sound. Not with footsteps, not with rustling branches or shaking leaves. It came as a glow. A bright, unmistakable shape suddenly appeared on Ronny's thermal feed, bold and vivid against the backdrop of cold forest terrain. It wasn't where one might expect it to be, on the ground. Instead, it was high, suspended, elevated, in the trees. It took a moment to process. A large heat signature burned white-hot through the thermal lens, but the ground sensors remained completely still. Whatever this thing was, it hadn't touched the earth. It had bypassed every trap, every sensor, every safeguard they had installed. And it had done so by staying above the threshold, in the branches, between trunks, hidden in plain sight. The implications rippled through Ronny's thoughts like static. Something that size, over 300 pounds at least, shouldn't be in the trees. It shouldn't be able to move up there without the forest announcing it. Branches should break, leaves should fall, something should give it away. But nothing had. And yet the heat was there, staring back. Mireya, now drawing closer to the origin point, confirmed it from the ground. Her handheld thermal picked up the same glow, pulsing above her line of sight. She raised the lens higher, scanned again, and the figure held position. Then, before she could move closer, another shape blinked onto the screen. Then another. Ronny's feed shifted. Multiple heat signatures now emerged, scattered but nearby. No longer just one anomaly suspended in the trees. Now there were several, and the question rose like smoke through every mind watching it unfold. What were they looking at? Because whatever this was, it wasn't random, and it wasn't alone, mobilizing the fleet. There was no second guessing. As soon as the heat signatures emerged, Ronny made the call. One of the drones broke free, its tether detached with a snap of precision, releasing the machine from its hovering post high above the forest. In seconds, it was airborne in full pursuit, gliding low and fast, slicing through the night toward Zone 3 where Mireya's feed had picked up the shapes. The drone wasn't wandering. It had coordinates, direction, a purpose burned into its navigation. Its thermal lens burned through branches and shadows, searching for the glowing figure that had only moments ago lit up the feed like a flare in the dark. Ronny tracked every frame from the ops base, watching the terrain rush by beneath the drone's camera as it zeroed in. Each second dragged like a minute. Below, Mireya moved fast and careful, her handheld scanner gripped tight in one hand, the other steadying her flashlight as she stepped over thick roots and uneven ground. The terrain was unforgiving, but she pressed forward, eyes never leaving the thermal screen. She was closing in. And then, nothing. The signal dropped, the shape disappeared. No fade, no scatter, it was just gone, as if it had never existed at all. Ronny switched feeds, scanned the zone from every angle, recalibrated the sensor readings, trying to catch even a residual glow, but there was no trace. The thermal feed showed nothing but static forest lines, and the seismic sensors hadn't twitched. Whatever had been there, whatever had made itself known so briefly, had left without a sound, without a shadow, without a sign. All that remained was the shallow rhythm of breathing, the electric buzz in everyone's nerves, and the unmistakable sense that they had just brushed against something they weren't meant to find. It hadn't run, it had vanished, and it had chosen the moment. The forest, so still just moments before, was far from finished. What began as a faint crack somewhere in the dark suddenly escalated into something unmistakably intentional, a sharp, jarring snap, followed quickly by another sound, louder and heavier, like wood being split with force rather than by accident. Then came the rhythm. A hollow knock echoed through the trees, not once, but twice, the sound rolling through the forest like a message being passed from one shadow to the next, too deliberate to be random, too forceful to be dismissed. Ronny's pulse surged as he leaned into the control panel, sending the drone forward at a sharper angle, guiding it toward Mireya's position with urgent precision, knowing that whatever had made that sound wasn't far from where she stood, and knowing she could hear it just as clearly. She reported the noise. But then came another voice. Russell. He had heard the same thing, clearly, strong enough to carry through the trees and make him stop in his tracks. And he wasn't anywhere near Mireya. He was in Zone 2. Now the pieces shifted uneasily in everyone's mind. This wasn't a single source making itself known in one place. This was something, perhaps more than one, delivering sound across distance, coordinating noise from different corners of the forest. The knocks weren't just sounds, they were signals. Whatever was out there was not only aware of their presence, it was communicating. Panic in the silence. The moment Russell reported the sound, everything shifted. Ronny redirected another drone, heading toward Russell's zone with a purpose sharpened by adrenaline. Every second mattered, and as the machine cut through the canopy, the ground crew tightened their focus. Russell moved slowly now, trying to trace the origin of the knock with his ears rather than his eyes, listening for the smallest break in rhythm. Every crunch underfoot became suspect. Every breath felt too loud. Above, the drone swerved and scanned, searching for contrast, for warmth, for anything that didn't belong. Mireya froze. Her instinct pulled her still. There it was, a shift in the air, subtle, but real. Something was moving nearby, changing its position, staying just out of sight, but close enough that she could feel it before she could see it. Yet the thermal camera showed nothing. Ronny cycled through the feeds, one after another, confusion creeping into his voice. The technology wasn't failing, but it also wasn't helping. The sensors remained silent. Still, she crept forward. And then, just as she crossed beneath a thicket of branches, a flicker. Something moved across the edge of the thermal feed, too fast to capture clearly, but enough to register as motion. Not a full shape, not a face, just a blur of heat in a world of cold. Mireya didn't hesitate. She moved toward it. Whatever it was, it didn't move like anything she'd encountered before. It darted between trees with unnatural grace. Mireya followed. Her feet hit the ground with urgency now, pushing through thorns and limbs, flashlight bouncing across trunks as she chased the ghost on her screen. Her thermal scanner shook slightly in her grip, still active, still blind. Ronny relayed updates from the drone above, its camera swinging wide, trying to lock on. Another drone prepped to launch. Another set of eyes joined the sky. But just when the heat began to take form, when they thought they had it in the open, it vanished again, completely, effortlessly, as if it had stepped into a pocket of air that didn't exist on their map. The forest was watching. A flicker of heat would flash, then disappear. A branch would bend, then snap back. Every time they thought they had a trail, it disappeared into silence. It didn't feel like a chase anymore. It felt rehearsed, calculated. A game of cat and mouse. Only they weren't the hunters. They were the bait. The treetop theory. There was a pattern emerging, one that Ronny couldn't ignore, no matter how strange it seemed. Heat signatures had appeared multiple times, massive in scale. But no matter how large they were, the ground sensors remained completely silent. Ronny stared at the feeds, then at the sensor logs, trying to make sense of what they weren't seeing. And then the possibility surfaced. The more he ran through the data, the more it made sense. The trees. What if these things weren't on the ground? What if they were above it all? Not hiding behind rocks or running through underbrush like prey, but maneuvering through the treetops, out of reach, out of sight, slipping across branches like shadows with weight. It sounded impossible, but the evidence wasn't lying. The thermal feeds were catching movement suspended above the terrain, and the sensors, scattered across the forest floor in a tight network, weren't reacting at all. If they were dealing with something capable of navigating the canopy, they weren't tracking a beast. They were tracking strategy. Mireya's handheld thermal scanner lit up again, a single bright flare high above her. She steadied her camera, recalibrated, and the shape held. Then, without warning, another appeared beside it. Then another. They moved like scouts. Watching. Waiting. Russell called in movement as well. Another flicker at the edge of Zone 2. He hadn't seen the shape directly, but the way the brush shifted, the strange displacement in his peripheral vision, it all pointed to something large and fast. The woods that had stood in absolute silence just hours ago were now teeming with life. But not the kind anyone expected. These weren't deer, they weren't owls. And whatever they weren't just passing through. The team was no longer searching the woods, they were standing inside something else's territory. Drones rotated overhead, scanning every angle across Zones 2 and 3, each machine widening its circle, feeding live footage back to Ronny's station. On the ground, Mireya and Russell moved like pieces on a chessboard, sweeping the dark with thermal scanners and flashlights, their routes calculated but uneasy. They weren't chasing anymore. They were trying to anticipate. The sensors remained eerily calm, still refusing to register a single movement beneath the surface. But then, out of the thermal wash, it returned. A surge of heat. Mireya turned toward it, her body tensed. She took a step forward, eyes locked on the scanner. Russell adjusted his position as well, angling for a cross approach. The plan was instinctive now. Flank it, surround it, trap it if they could. Ronny leaned in, zooming the drone lens with precision, tracking every detail from above. But then, as quickly as it had come, everything went black. The heat disappeared in an instant. No fade, no blur, just absence. The thermal screen went empty. The forest, for the 100th time that night, swallowed it whole. And the only thing left behind was the echo of something too smart to be caught, and too close to be ignored. Final moments. It happened fast. So fast that instinct kicked in before thought could catch up. Behind Mireia, something snapped with terrifying force. She spun around. Another crack followed, sharper than the first. Then came a knock, deep and hollow, reverberating through the trees like a coded warning, echoing off trunks and carrying on still air. It wasn't random. It had rhythm. It had weight. Ronny tensed behind the control station, hands frozen over the console, eyes flicking between thermal feeds and motion sensors, heart hammering against the soundproof walls of the ops van. Every system was active. Every drone was scanning. And still, something had moved without being seen. Then came the thud. From the direction of Zone 2, a low, heavy impact sent vibrations through the ground. It wasn't caught on the sensors, but it was there. Tension coiled around every breath. Mireia went still again, her light raised, her scanner catching only static and cold. Russell paused, listening. No one spoke. No one dared. Above them, the drones hovered in complete silence. The forest was no longer quiet in the way it had been earlier. Now it pulsed with something unseen, something vast, deliberate, intelligent, not visible, but undeniably present. And then, it was gone. The heat signatures vanished from every screen as if erased. One frame they were there, defined, burning, and in the next, they simply ceased to exist. The knocking stopped. No branches broke. No leaves stirred. The seismic sensors, still waiting, still armed, remained untouched, silent beacons in a forest that no longer moved. The woods froze. But this time, the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with everything that had just happened, heavy with the echo of things too strange to name. Ronny scanned every angle, every feed, desperate for one last glimpse of heat or movement. But the screens showed nothing but void. Mireia regrouped with Russell, each of them quiet, listening for something, anything, that might explain what had just occurred. But the forest gave no answers. Only the same blank silence it had offered at the start. All the technology, all the preparation, all the data. It didn't matter, because what they felt now, what they all felt in their bones, was the same thing they'd sensed from the moment they returned to the lake. They had been watched. Something massive had moved above them, through them, around them, and it had done so with precision, awareness, and control. And the worst part? It had never once tried to hide. It had only made sure they could never truly see. But here's what made this different. This time, the thermal camera saw it. The footage didn't lie. Clear heat signatures. It was real. It was recorded. And it may just be the closest, clearest thermal evidence of Bigfoot ever captured. No blur, no doubt. Just proof.